Robbie Lawler was out of control.
This is Double Cross, the murder of Robbie Lawler.
It was going to be an all-out war with him in the middle of it.
A Crime World special investigation podcast based on my new book, Web of Betrayal, wherever you get your podcasts. Alison, thanks very much for coming on. We haven't spoken in a while, but our New Year's resolutions, well, mine anyway, speak to you a bit more often. So this is an incredible story that sort of, followed over Christmas and into the new year. The disappearance, as it is, of John George. And I think the most recent development is that the Spanish police have launched a murder investigation. But as we haven't actually covered it yet, bring us back to the beginning and where it started.
Okay, so John George from Belfast, he is 37, he has 2 children. He travelled to Spain, to the Alicante region of Spain, in and around the second week of December. He told his family he was going to meet friends for a couple of days, and the last contact they had with him was at about 1:30 on the 14th of December. He phoned home, phoned his father, Billy. He was a wee bit distressed, I'd say, during that call. Billy said to him, "Get on a plane and get yourself home. The people you're with are not your friends. Just get home." He was booked on to an EasyJet flight on December the 18th from Alicante to Belfast International, and he never boarded that flight. Now, a lot of people would say, well, Alicante could have been in Benidorm, he could have been somewhere, on the piss somewhere. Billy George tells me that he was someone who would have phoned him 68 times a day. He actually was a nuisance, he phoned that much. And so immediately within a day, they started thinking there was something weird, that he hadn't called them back, he wasn't answering his phone. And people thought maybe he just lost his phone, that would be fine. But when he didn't get on the plane on the 18th, they started to worry. At the first, they started just putting stuff on Facebook and whatever, saying, if anyone's seen him in and around this area. They tried to contact the person who he said he was going to meet on holiday, and they had shut down all of their social media. Billy George did get speaking to him briefly, but he...
What date was that on that he got speaking to him briefly?
He got speaking to him, I think it was sometime in and around the 20th, 21st of December, but the person wouldn't tell him where he was, and then put the phone down on him and switched the phone off. The phone hasn't been switched on again since then. So all over Christmas, the family are frantic. This guy has 2 kids. This is really a character for him. He's, quite codependent almost on his family. So the fact that they hadn't heard from him, they were concerned, very, very worried. And then things sort of hotted up in terms of what they were hearing that may have well happened to him. They went over to Spain then to search for him as soon as Christmas was over. Billy went over first and then was joined by some other people and other family members. And then last Saturday, I got up to get the red-eye flight very early in the morning. I went over, and just as I landed, they had traced the house. They'd been given a tip-off of address where they knew that their son had been staying, one of the last places he was seen. And they arrived at that house. Shortly after they arrived, the Guardia Civil arrived not long after them, and then I arrived not long after that. There was a wee bit of chaos going on at this particular time. There was 2 younger men from Northern Ireland in that house. Both of them, the police spoke to them. They are suspects only in that it's believed that they know something about what happened. They're not suspected of actually being involved in the killing of Mr. George, who his family now believed at this stage had been murdered. The police spoke to them, forensics officers arrived, took some things away. At this stage, they were saying this is now no longer a missing person investigation, it's a criminal investigation, but not a murder investigation. But then they spoke to several neighbours, they were taking CCTV, they were taking dash cam, there was a mobile home, like a camper van parked outside with dash cam at each side of it, and the police were very interested in it. And then I went up and down that street and spoke to some of the neighbours. Very affluent sort of area of Spain, quite close to Lasagna. Beautiful villas, mostly Norwegians, a lot of Dutch, They were telling me a lot of people who would live there maybe 5 months of the year and then rent the place out for the summer months. Not the kind of place you would imagine a bunch of sort of wannabe bad boy gangsters from Northern Ireland landing into the middle of it, which is why they draw attention to themselves straight away. So a guy from Northern Ireland who is actually a suspect in the murder. So take away these 2 guys, younger fellas. Fella from Northern Ireland had been renting this villa along with a teenage girl. They had left on the 20th of December. The neighbours said that the girl would have come out and she had decorated the Christmas tree at the front. It covered in lights. It would have all switched on. There'd been dogs barking. a guy would have come out on his motorbike and off he went. And on the 20th December, the neighbour said the house went into darkness and they disappeared and hadn't been seen since. One of the other neighbours told me that the BMW that they had been driving showed up about a week or two before this, bashed up to pieces, like it had been in a car accident.
Which is bringing you back further towards the 14th of December as opposed to the 20th.
The day. And then I knew that police then were taking this much more seriously than maybe they were publicly saying, because all of the neighbours I spoke to had been asked a very specific question by police, by the Garda Civil, had asked them, did you hear gunshots from that property between the 14th and the 17th of December? Now, that's very specific. The family didn't even have that date of the 17th in their mind. So the fact that they knew that led me to believe that there was more known by the Spanish police than they were telling us. The neighbour said that it was coming up to Christmas in Spain. They have a lot of fiestas and holy holidays, and there was a lot of fireworks and stuff around that time. But one of the neighbours did go and check through their CCTV before he handed it over to the police. And he said in and around that sort of 14, 15, 16, there was a lot of comings and goings in that house. There was cars, there was people getting in and out. There's no sound on his CCTV, so he couldn't hear what they were saying. But he said that there was just a lot of activity. One of the other neighbours said, look up and down this street. You know, these are retired couples, professionals, you know, people mainly from, you know, Europeans, mainly Scandinavians living here. A bunch of people from Northern Ireland, you know, with, you know, motorbikes and fancy beamers and lots of comes and go. And they stood out like sore thumbs. They just nobody.
Is this Torrevieja where it is, or is it a different part of Alicante? Is it Torrevieja?
It's Orwellia, I think it is, you call it. So it's about a 40-minute drive from Alicante Airport. They call that the Alicante region. So the police force or the Alicante region police. But I suppose for people who would maybe holiday in that region, it's quite close to Lasagna, which is where a lot of people from Ireland, I think, would holiday.
Yes, and it's also the place where John Gilligan would have based himself for a long time. Other Irish gangsters certainly have properties out there and would be out there quite a lot. It's a bit of a hotbed, actually, while it is all that you say as well. And I've been there a few times on different stories. Fabulous villas, you know, a sort of a population of wealthy Europeans living side by side, cheek by jowl with some of the underworld's most infamous characters.
But most of those people who you're talking about, they're experienced gangsters who would have the sense to keep their head down. These people were not keeping their head down. They were making it very obvious that they shouldn't, you know, they were not the type of people who usually lived down there. And they'd been jumping from villa to villa. They had been using a guy who was actually had a British passport, but he had lived in Alicante all his life, I think from he was like 2 or 3 years of age. They were using him to rent both residential and commercial properties that they were using. The commercial properties were never actually turning into anything. They were being hired to open, you know, gyms, you know, tattoo parlors, cannabis shops, cafes, but nothing ever happened with them. A lot of villas, which I think a lot of them were being used for cannabis grows, where they were just renting the villa and then using it for that. So these are, you know, people who were over there, I suppose, you know, play acting in that sort of gangster world, in a world that was the Costa del Crime at one stage. You know, a lot of English or sort of old school criminals would have made that part of Spain their home back in the day, you know, when you go back to the 70s and the 80s. They stood out like a sore thumb. They'd gone. So the person who is the main suspect, this girl, had left. They had left these two boys behind. And, you know, the only way I can explain, because I stood outside that house for most of the day, went up and down the street, spoke to the neighbours. The only way I could describe those two young men is they looked like ghosts. I mean, they were living in Spain in a sunny climate. They'd been there for months.
Right.
And they were grey.
They were on their factor 50.
They were the colour of, like, the only way I could describe them is they were colour of like cold porridge, dark circles around their eyes, their hoods up, they were unkempt, unshaven, they looked scruffy, they looked dirty. They were, you know, shaken. And one of them, somebody showed me a picture of him about 6 months previously, before, as he just arrived in Spain, you know, and he was tanned, muscly, you know, that sort of 20-something, you know, that look that the men that age have. And to go from that to that in 6 months, you know, that was probably the bit that I thought, my goodness, there's people on social media portraying this as something, and when these people arrive, it's something very, very different. But that guy's missing. John George is missing. Enter into it a host of misinformation and disinformation that was being passed. So there is a video of John George where he basically looks like he's very deeply intoxicated when he arrived in Spain, and he's messing around saying, oh, I'm with the Russian mafia, with the Kinahans, I've actually had this conversation where I don't know how many other people, because you and I both work in crime reporting and we know, but maybe other people who work in other aspects of reporting don't know. Anything that happens now that has even remotely got anything to do with drugs or any kind of drug-related violence, the first thing people say is, I heard it was the Kinahans. And 99 times out of 100, it has got nothing to do with the Kinahans. It also hadn't got anything to do with Russians. So there's a video of John George, and in this you can see he looks a bit out of it. He's waffling on, going on about Russian mafia and all sorts of things. And you can hear a guy speaking on a mobile phone in a foreign language. And so originally it was like, oh, he was with people from the Russian mafia. So I would have quite a lot of friends in that region of Spain where I'd be back and forth with her quite a lot of times. And one of them owns a lot of businesses, and I know she employs Russians and Ukrainians in that business. So I had sent it to her and said, could you get one of the girls to listen to this and tell me what language they're speaking, and is it Russian? And she came back and said, no, it's not Russian, it's not Ukrainian. She thinks it sounds Romanian. So then I had sent it to Romanians who I know who live in Belfast. They listened to it and said, that's not Romanian. It's also not Albanian, because Albanian and Romanian are quite similar, and I understand some words of Albanian. I can't speak it, but I would know that it was Albanian. So it's not a Romanian, it's not Albanian, it's not Romani either, which is obviously a different dialect. So it turns out it was actually a guy from Czechoslovakian. So enter into this another character who is a guy from the Czech Republic who is a key suspect in this. In terms
so he's in the background. He's in the background as John George is messing about on this video,
waffling on his phone, and you can hear him speaking in a language which we then established
is Czechoslovakian. So you know that video was taken when he arrives in around sort of the 14th. The last phone call he has with his father, he's sounding a bit distressed, is the 14th of December, and the police in Spain appear to be now homing in on the 14th to the 17th.
The 17th. Yeah.
So something has happened within that house, within that property, where neighbours have said they've seen all these cars and bikes and activities going on. And the question has been asked, did anyone hear gunshots? So we can kind of see where this is going. But the Spanish police seem to be fairly slow in launching an actual murder inquiry. I mean, we're well into the new year now, and they have only just done so.
Yeah, so while I was there, Billy George had a meeting with the Spanish police, with detectives. He had asked, could he come in and speak to them? So I actually drove him down to that meeting, and he had said, look, will you come in and sit in this meeting with me? Which I was prepared to do, but then the police officer there actually said, could you have passports before I start speaking to you so that we know who you are? And I gave him my passport, and he put my name in the computer and said, you're a journalist, you need to go, or we're going to stop this meeting. And I said, look, please don't stop the meeting. This man is desperate for information about his son. I will get up and walk outside and wait outside. He had asked me would I come with him, which I was happy to do, but I'm also happy to leave. I don't know whether I'd be scared or impressed that he put my name in a computer in Spain and it came up that I was a journalist. I don't know what kind of file exists on me in the Alicante region of Spain, but clearly there's something. Because then I had to stand outside for an hour and a half waiting while this meeting went on. Billy came out of the meeting and he wasn't happy about what had been said. He says that they weren't giving him very much information, but I just think that's what way they operate there. It's a very different judicial system. It's a very different justice system. They're not stupid. They're not naive. These are very, very experienced officers who, as you said, there's been a lot of gang crime on that part of Spain for years, for decades going back. This isn't their first rodeo, so to speak. They've seen all this before. But they're not for sharing information the way maybe you would have like a liaison officer here who would work with families and keep them up to date about people who were arrested and things like that. That's not going to happen in Spain. You're not going to get any of that. So while it would be, if it was someone belonging to you, you would be frustrated at the speed at which it's moving. I have the impression that the Spanish police know more than they're letting on, and that they're working towards it. I do think that in Spain, you have to have quite a considerable amount of the case already done before you arrest the suspect. It's not like here you can arrest people several times and let them out and arrest them several times. So I do think there's an element of that going on. Meantime, the family were having to be, I suppose, detectives themselves. I remember, man, I didn't know these people till last week. I'd never met them, never spoke to them. I arrived and found. And can I also say too, because I noticed a lot of people on social media making comments about, well, what was he doing with them and what was he doing there? John's parents, Billy and Sharon, are very upfront about their son and their son's past. They're not, saying, our poor little angel went to Spain and these big bad boys picked on him. I mean, I had a conversation with his mother, which I think will resonate with a lot of people that listen to your podcast, Nicola, because what she said was he was a boxer and he was a very good boxer. He was a great kid. He would have been in bed at 9:30 and up to crack of dawn to go and do his road work before he started training in the gym. He had, as a kid, he had fought Carl Frampton and beat him. Right. And he's actually mentioned in Carl Frampton's book. So this lad had a promising future ahead of him. And then when he hit 16, and this is like a story as old as time, fell in with a bad crowd, started hanging around with people who were much older than him, and he ended up finding himself in prison in the Youth Detention Centre. His mother said that he told her that while he was there, that when they first put him in there, he had never spent a night not under his parents' roof, and he cried and cried and cried himself to sleep every night. And eventually they prescribed him with medication to help him sleep and with his anxiety. And he became addicted to that and then started buying prescription medication off other prisoners. And by the time he emerged from prison, he was addicted to those type of prescription drugs. And he had also made himself a whole lot of new friends who he had met in prison, who were actual criminals. And that is, I visit prisons quite a lot. I was actually up in Highbank a few weeks before Christmas. And if you speak to many of those young men there, their stories are very similar. I wanted to be a professional footballer and then this happened. I wanted to do this and then this happened. So they're very upfront about that. They're not pretending that John was some angel. John had met the people who he was going to meet in Spain. He had been introduced to them through people that he had met in prison.
So he's somebody who's made bad decisions, and the family are openly saying that. But they obviously had a real closeness, that he was ringing his father so often that they were able to recognise the distress in his voice around the 14th, and that they became so worried so quickly when they didn't hear from him. So it's obviously a very close family too.
So he sounds to me as if he was someone who was very naive, very easily led. If you told him, we're going to do this and there's big money in this and we'll make a fortune, he'd have been the first way out the door to do it, regardless of the consequences. He sounds like, someone who had been, and this is, I suppose, the story behind the story. The person who, from Northern Ireland, who's the main suspect, has deleted all their social media. Prior to them deleting their social media, it was like the Instagram lifestyles of the rich and famous. He was posting pictures of jet skis and Harley Davidson motorbikes and beautiful villas that are worth, 1-2 million euro, posting pictures at really high-end restaurants, the clinking of glasses, the whole thing, and painting a picture of, look, this is the life I'm living out here. I'm the big bad boy gangster opening all these businesses. Look at me. And then young men were being sent for from Northern Ireland who were coming out to join him. And they were to be, whatever they were to be, his runners, but to mind these properties that he was renting, to do whatever it was he was bringing them out to do, clearly with the lure and the promise of a flashy lifestyle. And then I seen two of those young men stand in the garden of that house, and they looked like ghosts. They looked like shadows, shells of human beings. So there's a story, I think, behind the story as well. John George has arrived out there for a few days. Whatever's happened, and we don't know, but we do know that there's two suspects. His family know that he's dead. Both of these suspects have been in touch, one directly and the other one indirectly. And I'll tell you a bit about that because I just find that very cruel intervention. So the guy from Czech Republic has spoke to the family and he's blaming the other person. He's saying, the other person killed your son. I don't know where your son's body is, but it might be here or it might be there or it might be... And he's sending them on wild goose chases. The other person is... all communication has been shut off, but through two women, one younger woman and one older woman, he was sending messages back to the family saying exactly the same thing. Your son's dead. I didn't kill him. That guy from the Czech Republic killed him. Ask him where his body is. I don't know where his body is. He killed him. I wasn't there. I know nothing about it. And then they're sending a lot of misinformation, we were stopped by the police, such and such, and I didn't see him after that. And the police are going, nonsense, never happened. Or no, we were stopped by a different police. It was the Mercia police. Ask them. They're saying nonsense, none of this ever happened. So there's a lot of misinformation sent the family on wild goose chases. And on one occasion I was out, there's a load of people who had arrived over, family and friends. They all had T-shirts where John George's face in it. They're out looking around And it was actually lovely because people in the area were coming over and going, look, we've seen this in the paper, read it online or seen it on social media. Can we join you? Because we know the area, we know the landscape. We'll take you around, show you where, you know, all the waste ground or potential places that he could be. And they were joining him. And the next thing, John's brother Darren, who is just the loveliest guy, he gets a message from one of these women, from the older women, going, she's sending me the location of John's body. And you can imagine, you know, everyone's done, oh my God. And there's people crying and hugging each other. And this is it. Thank God we'll get to bring him home. They were saying, we'll ring Kevin Bell, you know, the Kevin Bell Trust that gets, they were literally ready to phone Kevin Bell Trust to try and get his body sent home. This is where it is. And the next thing, the message comes through and Darren says to me, Allison, where is that? And he shows me the phone. And it was a map with a circle drawn around about a 60, 70 square mile radius right from the coast going right up into the inland. And I said, Darren, that's nowhere. That's like, what I actually said to him at the time was, that's like me saying to you, your brother's body's somewhere between Belfast and Newry. It could be anywhere there, but it's actually longer. It's actually Dundalk. It would be like me saying there's a body and it's somewhere between Belfast and Dundalk. Either way side, couldn't tell you where, we'll find it. I mean, it was just, I thought it was a nasty thing to do on someone, you know, and these people were, they thought that was it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's it. We're going to get him. We'll get him home. We'll get out of here. We'll get out of Spain. We'll go home. We'll give him a decent burial. At least as, you know, his mother have somewhere to put flowers. And it was just nonsense. And the person
who totally frantic,
would be intelligent enough to know that it was nonsense. And that was probably one of the things that I was there that I thought, these people and their associates and everyone with them, they're just toying with this family and they're toying with their
So tell me this, go back to the house. Was the house, you know, did the police move in and was that house at one point or at any point that you know of been a crime scene?
So it was that day, it definitely was, because the forensics officer...
That day being what date?
That was on Saturday, which I think was the 29th of December. So when I was there, police showed up. Uniformed police showed up then. Forensics officers showed up. They held the two young men. Now, we were later told that one of those young men that both those young men were on police bail. Someone said, well, then why didn't they take their passports? Because I ended up on the same flight as one of them on the way home. But yeah.
Right.
But they could have taken their passport because, as you know, people listening to this may or may not know, in Northern Ireland, we have a right to dual citizenship because of the Good Friday Agreement. So I could have a British or an Irish passport or both. And just a lot of people have both. Then if they lost one, they have another one. So they may well have done that. But the thing is that they may have information that have been helpful to the family, but they're pretty inconsequential, I think, when it comes to the actual murder and disappearance, at which point there are two men and potentially one woman who may have been involved in helping or assisting in some way. And that is as far as I can see. And they have been told, they have managed to rule out themselves, probably through their own detective work, that there is no Russian mafia, there's no Albanian gangsters. At one stage, some random Scouser was being thrown into the mix, you know, some Scouse gangster. It might have been him, the Kinahans, you know, forget everybody you can think of. All of this is ruled out. What happened was closer to home, and it was people who were known to John George. And really, at this point, the family are saying, you know, we don't even care at this point.
So this is probably some sort of a chaotic fight, some sort of a, you know, perhaps a drug-fueled row has broken out within this home. But unfortunately...
The use of a weapon, I think, elevates that. Usually if you have a row, someone gets battered or, you know, go, well, you know, didn't mean to do that or...
But there's been some reports, obviously, of gunshots, and clearly he's been taken somewhere. But as the days go on, as is the case in a lot of, you know, missing people, or when a murder investigation isn't started quick enough, there has been presumably a loss of evidence there, and the chances of finding him and discovering
a significant loss of evidence. The people who, if you look at today's Belfast Telegraph, there's a young woman called Madison Allen who had been living in that house. She is an OnlyFans creator who had been living there. She says, I didn't leave that house because anything happened to John George, and I left because I have 6XL bullies and it was too small for them and I needed to move to a bigger place. I don't know who has 6XL bullies. That even, it gives me a headache even thinking about it.
But where did she make this video?
She put this video on TikTok 2 days ago.
From Spain.
And she had been, which is why I'm able to say her name, because she named herself as being, and claiming that she knew nothing about this, that she now thinks she's under threat, that she's not telling anyone where she's living because she's afraid that she's under threat, that her dogs, she mentions her dogs more than she mentions John George in this video. But she said she's been helping the family. Well, I have seen the communication between her and the family, and it was less than helpful in terms of what information it was saying. But what we are saying is the picture that I've told you already. They're just all blaming each other. Everyone's blaming each other. And in the meantime, Canine Search and Rescue, who are a rescue service from Northern Ireland, they went over on New Year's Day with 2 dogs, and they're trying to look. But there's no point in looking unless you have a general location. And they keep getting told locations where he may be, and he's just not there. And until someone within this group breaks rank and says he's in this area or that area, so that they can actually get either Spanish sniffer dogs or the dogs that are there, the cadaver dogs that are there at the minute, to find him. Because they're becoming, when I was there, these people hadn't been eating, they haven't been sleeping, they look exhausted, their hopes are, every day it's a roller coaster where their hopes are built up. This is going to happen today, and then it doesn't happen. But we're going to get information on this today, and then it doesn't happen. And this has been going on and on and on for such a long time that, you would fear for their health, even in terms of their mental health and their physical health, if they don't get some answers soon. When I spoke to Billy this morning, and just to get an update of what has happened, and he sounds beaten, but he just says, I just want to bring him home and bury him. Like, I don't even care about police and investigations and who did it and who didn't do it anymore. Just want to find him.
And of course, the problem with that area is Alicante there on the Costa Blanca, and the amount of criminality that is embedded there for a long time. There have been people that have gone missing there before, criminals, and because of the criminal, some of them never been found. John McKeown comes to mind, known as the Mexican. He went missing out there, but a very famous case when the Westies, they were a Blanchardstown young crew from Dublin, Bernard Verb Sugg, and he was shot dead, and his brother Stephen Sugg, who was 27, and Shane Coates, his business partner, went out to Alicante to sort of set themselves up. They went missing, and their bodies were found years later, from memory, in a concrete grave in some sort of a warehousing unit on the outskirts of Alicante. And the kind of the process of disappearing them like that was being linked to associates of the John Gilligan mob that had been out there. Serious criminals who've been involved in criminality for decades, who know the geography of the area, who know the place, and who are willing for a wage to do and help anybody in situations, where something chaotic has gone off.
Yeah, and that's it. Could he have been put in the water? Could he be? There's big, deep stone wells everywhere. There's loads of waste ground, loads of scruff ground. There's mountains, and there's mountainous areas which are, so rural that no one would ever find a body. And, the family, while they were there, because there's the T-shirts on and they're so visible, people were stopping them. Or even when they're going in, to a cafe to get a bottle of water, they were saying, oh, there's such and such went missing here years ago, and his family come once a year and hold a vigil for him, but his body was never found. One woman who they met, a girl from the south, started crying and saying, look, I've been saying this on social media, but I can't even speak to you because my brother was missing, and they could only identify him by his tattoos because he was dismembered in this area. And she says, I can't even speak to you because I'm so upset, because it's bringing it all back and it's bringing the trauma. As you said, you can see looking around there, that's a really good area if you want to disappear. So say you wanted to disappear yourself, in terms of you're wanted for something, you want to go over there, you get a new identity. Everyone comes from somewhere else anyway. So as long as you're not doing what these boys were doing and drawing attention to yourself, no one's going to bat an eyelid, and you could very easily disappear. But also, if you wanted to disappear a person, there are so many places and opportunities to take someone and put their body. And I think that's now the George families, their biggest fear is that are we going to be one of those families that's going to land here once a year and hold a vigil, and we're never going to get them back, because that is causing them really, really deep distress. And they're actually being helped by Joanne Dorian, who is the ambassador for Canine Search and Rescue, and also for Missing People UK. And she is the sister of Lisa Dorian, who was murdered, missing from a caravan park in Ballyhalbert nearly 20 years ago, and her body's never been found, And Joanne dedicates her life to trying to help other people, and never asked for any thanks for it or any credit for it. And I kept, at the very start, when I was speaking to the family, I said, talk to Joanne Dorian, because if anyone understands what you're going through, it's her, and she'll be able to help and advise you. And she has been really doing all that in her usual sort of quiet, behind the scenes manner. But you can see that, as time goes on, they get more and more desperate, because, as you said, key evidence was lost in those early days when it was just treated as, for God's sake, it's just another boy, went on the lash in Spain, he could be anywhere. And then as it turned into a criminal investigation, then as it turned into a murder investigation.
Well, Allison Morris, thank you very much for that update. And I've no doubt we're going to be coming back to this story again. So for the moment, thank you. I'm Nicola Tallant and you're watching Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs and the underworld in Ireland and across the globe. Make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you can be the first to watch all our latest episodes. You can also listen wherever you get your podcasts.